Welcome back to another impactful episode of the PSTA podcast. It is Craig King, your favorite host in the whole wide world, and your favorite guest, crowd favorite, Patrick Kelly. I think this is the right one. There it is.
There it is.
Well, and I've been practicing Patrick and guests and family and friends who listen. So we hope that this is what you hear this summer, educators.
Look at all the buttons.
Yes, we want you to be relaxing this summer, but we're not there yet. That's why we're here today.
What I appreciate about that, Craig, is that you tested it before you actually went live with it on the podcast. That's a Educator 101 trick. Don't ever use something in class before you've tested it prior to class.
Well, that was a shot at me, everyone. If you didn't listen to the last week, Patrick is talking about how I didn't practice and I gave you this. I don't even think it was that.
I don't either, but that was appropriate based on what happened.
Yes. So let's jump right into it, Patrick. We're winding down the days. How many days are we?
6 more days.
6 days. Lucky number 6. So let's jump right into it, Patrick. I got your land and your 1 minute advocacy, and so let's jump off with 305/4280/ the hybrid bill / whatever else we can fit into that bill to make it work.
Yeah, no. So this week, the House Education Committee did something a lot like last week. If you listened to last week's podcast, you caught that the House Education K-12 Subcommittee had inserted H-4280, the Educator Assistance Act, into S-124, a bill that would create a limited non-certified teacher pilot program to enhance educator recruitment in South Carolina. So this week, not to be outdone, the full Education Committee decided to insert H-4280 into another bill, S-305. That is Senator Young's bill. That's actually a bill that PSTA strongly supports, has been advocating for 2 years. The long and short of that bill is it would allow a teacher who has at least 5 years of related work experience to their teaching field outside of education to receive years of experience on their teacher certificate, which obviously means they get paid at a higher step on the salary schedule. PSTA thinks that's a great action to recruit more talent to the profession, to help retain the teachers that we already have that have experience. But then the House Education Committee made it even better by putting H-4280 into the bill. And so now, as the chair of the House Education Committee put it, the Senate has 2 chances to get this bill across the finish line, because if the House passes S-305 and S-124 this week, as we anticipate they are likely to do, both of those now hybrid bills will go straight to the Senate floor. There will be no need for a Senate subcommittee, and the senators can decide on the floor of the Senate whether to take action on the Educator Assistance Act or not.
Well, that's great news, Patrick, and we've given you the mechanism to engage and encourage your senator to pass that right on through, but we don't anticipate any debate really on that because of what they did, correct? Am I correct in that, Patrick?
Well, I don't anticipate a lot of debate on the House side.
Okay.
The Senate side's a different animal, because if the Senate, if all 46 senators were wild about this bill, they've had it for a year. They could have passed it by now. And you know, I think part of why the bill hasn't moved in the Senate yet, and this is not something that is definitive fact, but in speaking with policymakers and speaking with other lobbyists and speaking with individuals that work in education that aren't necessarily in the classroom, there's a couple of myths that I think exist about what H-4280 would actually do. And I think we probably need to bust those myths. So let's do a little bit of myth busting about this bill. Myth number 1 is that H-4280 would mean teachers no longer have to honor their contracts. And frankly, that's just false. And if it was true, PSTA would not be supporting the bill, because PSTA believes that teaching is a certified profession for a reason, and professionals honor contracts. But some individuals have some heartburn, I think, about 4280 for 2 reasons. Number 1, it would give teachers the ability to withdraw an accepted contract within 10 days of their final salary schedule being posted. And so I've heard people say, well, that means that teachers aren't bound to their contracts. And I hear that, and I think there's legitimacy there. But I would also offer, I'm not aware of any other contract in any other profession where the contract doesn't include the salary. Like, that feels like a pretty important part of a contract is the individual. Right now, the way teacher contracts are written, the teacher agrees to provide whatever services and work the district requires, but the district guarantees that they will pay according to the salary schedule, but it doesn't say what the salary is. Like, I just signed my teacher contract over the weekend. I have no idea what I'm getting paid next year. I've got a guess based on what the state has done in the budget process, but it's not set in stone. The other reason why I think people point at this bill and say, well, it means teachers can just break their contract is because it modifies the breach of contract statute. That currently under state law, if a teacher breaches an employment contract during their 12-month employment period, if a local district reports that teacher's certificate to the state board, state law says that the state board must suspend the teacher's certificate for up to 12 months from the date of the state board taking action. If the bill said that teachers could breach their contract at any time for any reason, I wouldn't be sitting here supporting it.
Right.
Because I'll tell you point blank, as someone who's still teaching every morning, I will not breach my contract for a light and transient reason because that's a disservice to my students. But by the same token, I'm not going to tell you that I wouldn't potentially look to breach my contract if I found out that, God forbid, a close family member was ailing in another state and I needed to move to care for him. Right. Or if my wife got a job in a different city and we wanted to live, crazy idea, we wanted to live in the same city to care for our daughters. I might
wild idea about
that. It is a crazy idea to think that a certified professional should have the capacity to be able to keep their family intact.
Right.
And so what 4280 would do is simply change the language of state law to where the state board may suspend the certificate. If a teacher breaches a contract for a transient and frivolous reason, then the state board can and probably should go ahead and suspend that certificate. But if the state board looks at it and goes, oh, you moved because your spouse got deployed and you just want to go with your spouse who's serving their country, we're not going to suspend that certificate. Right. I think that's good public policy.
That is.
The other myth to bust real quick about this particular bill is I think there's a myth out there that H4280 means that teachers would no longer have to do professional development. And I'm just going to rock that one to bed because prior to working for PSTA, you know this, Craig, I was in charge of professional learning for the state's fifth largest district. My title was literally coordinator of professional learning. I'm a big fan of ongoing professional growth and learning, and if this bill meant that teachers no longer had to grow and learn and enhance their practice, then I'd be the biggest opponent of this bill under the sun.
Sure.
All the bill says is that an educator who's achieved a professional certificate will be awarded a permanent certificate. And that means that they don't have to submit paperwork to the State Department of Education every 5 years to document 120 hours of professional learning. That doesn't mean they don't have to do the professional learning. They just don't have to send in the paperwork.
That's right.
And here, I'm not good at math. Like, I'm a government teacher, Craig, but I can handle this math.
Yeah.
H4280 as amended, or at least the S124 version of 4280, since there's two of these things out there now, states that a teacher has 10 non-instructional days as part of our contract. S124 would amend it to say that 4 of those 10 days must be for high-quality professional learning. If I do 4 days at 8 hours a day for 5 years, I think that's 160 hours over a 5-year period, and I'm pretty confident 160 is greater than 120.
Last time I checked, it is.
Thank you for confirming that. So a teacher would actually do more than the required number of professional development hours. They just don't have to submit the paperwork to prove that they complied with their contract.
And to add to that, the PD that many teachers do on their own anyway, you know, and you add that to what we just figured out.
And all the PD that teachers do that don't come with a neat little certificate.
Exactly.
Like how many, some of the best professional learning in my career has been collaboration with, like right now, The best professional learning I do right now is with the other gentleman who teaches AP US Government at Blythewood High School. He and I work together to develop assessments, to refine assessments, to look at our lesson pacing. That's the best growth I've got right now, but I don't get a certificate that says, congratulations, you engaged in 30 hours of professional collaboration with your certified professional colleague this year.
Yep.
So this idea that 4280 eliminates teacher professional development, it's false.
Well, and it also goes to something we shared at the beginning of this legislative session with some of the bills that just outlines and demonstrates respect for our teachers. And I think that's what this is doing. And clarify something for me, Patrick. The first myth that you busted dealt with, I'm losing my train of thought.
Contracts.
That's right. And so this would, the caveat to that is just they can only break their contract. That 10-day grace period is only related to the pay of that teacher, correct?
It's within 10 days of the salary schedule being posted. Now, the bill doesn't specify that you can only withdraw the accepted contract in that 10 days because you're upset about your salary. But if it's within 10 days of the salary schedule being posted, the intent there is to make sure that individuals know what they're being offered as a term of employment before the contract is fully binding.
Gotcha. 10-4. All right. Sounds good.
Can I say one more thing about that bill?
You can.
Because you asked about it passing. It's not guaranteed.
Right.
And I'm going to issue a challenge right now to anybody listening to this podcast. You got to engage on this thing. When this thing gets out of the House, PSTA will send out alerts to members to give you an opportunity to reach out to your senator to ask them to concur with the House version of this bill of S305. They need to hear from teachers.
And don't expect it to be a Friday afternoon. It could be in the middle of the week. Whenever that happens, you'll probably start receiving alerts. Am I correct,
That's
Patrick?
exactly it. The alert's already ready to go. I'm just waiting for the action in the House. And if and when that happens, we will send info out to members. But I am telling teachers, you have got to engage on this thing. If you find yourself this time next year scrounging for a certificate from 2021 in the midst of COVID chaos that proves that you did 20 hours of Google Classroom PD, and you wonder, why in the world do I have to find this piece of paper when I am a Google Classroom Pro, and you didn't make a phone call or send an email this week, there's a connection there. Yeah. Now, I'm not Pollyanna. I'm not saying that if 15,000 teachers call the Senate this week that S305 is going to pass. That's not how it works. There's no guarantee that just because a group is active and engaged and sharing their voice that they're going to get what they want. That's a pluralist democracy. Mm-hmm. But I can guarantee you that if the Senate hears from 3 teachers this week, the odds of that bill passing as amended by the House go way down. Mm-hmm. Because as you and I both heard, Craig, from a representative a few weeks ago during a Hill Day, he told the teachers from his district that he is responsive to the most vocal groups in his community. Mm-hmm. Teachers are going to have to be vocal if they want this bill to get to the finish line. So here's a challenge. Pick up the phone, call somebody, send an email, but let your voice be heard if you would like to reduce non-instructional burdens on educators and enhance professional treatment of educators in South Carolina.
Well said, Mr. Kelly, our favorite guest. You heard it here first. So we finally got a conference committee on 3728, the Transparency and Integrity in Education Act.
Yes, it is up for, we're recording this on Monday, April 29th. It is up for a conference committee at 10 a.m. on Tuesday, April 30th. It's been almost exactly 12 months since the Senate passed their version of this bill. The Senate version differs from the House version. That's why it's in conference committee. There's a lot of moving parts to this bill. It's 12 pages long. The core, though, of what PSTA is focused on is there are 2 elements in the House bill that were removed by the Senate that we firmly believe cannot be in a final version of this bill that goes to Governor McMaster, because if they're there, those 2 provisions will chill the ability of teachers to deliver high-quality instruction aligned to state standards and will create non-instructional burdens on teachers that will diminish the time and effort they can put into designing lessons and contacting parents and grading assessments and everything else it is that we know teachers need to do.
Yeah. And those two elements are in red on that land, correct?
Yeah, so there was a chart in the email to PSTA members on Friday that highlight those two provisions in red. For those that may not see those emails, the first provision in the House would require a teacher to post to the school district, I think website, but the bill actually missed the word website. So we're going to assume that it is post to the school district website 3 days prior to using any new instructional content or material. And it doesn't define what that instructional content or material is. So it could be a book, it could be a video clip, but if it wasn't in your syllabus at the start of the year, you got to post it 3 days prior to it being used. And that section further reads that a parent could withdraw their child from any instructional topic for any reason at the parent's sole discretion, and then the teacher has to come up with a new lesson plan to help that child master the required content in state standards without running afoul of whatever objection existed to the original instructional content. That's challenging, to put it mildly.
Very challenging for teachers.
The second provision would allow any parent in the United States, because it doesn't specify just a parent of South Carolina or a parent of a South Carolina school district. It states that any parent or guardian shall have a private cause of action, which simply means the ability to sue. So any parent or guardian shall have a private cause of action to file for injunctive relief from a court to block an instructional practice in a district. So the parent's not suing for monetary damages, and they're not suing the teacher, but they're suing the district to prevent the district from engaging in instructional practices. And I'm just going to be frank, we've seen this playbook in other states. We will find lawsuits from individuals that have no connection to South Carolina schools that are designed for no purpose other than to gunk up the operations of South Carolina schools.
Yep. And disrupt classrooms.
Disrupt classrooms, draw down district resources, because districts are going to have to allocate time and money to deal with those potential lawsuits. Even if the lawsuits get tossed as frivolous, which in many cases they probably would be, in fact, I would guarantee in pretty much every case they would be, it still takes time to deal with a frivolous lawsuit. We don't need to be opening that door when the Transparency Act has a very meticulous procedure for an individual to file a complaint if they think that a school or teacher has violated a provision of this bill.
Yeah. Conference committee tomorrow. I think I looked, and it will not be streamed for those of you that probably won't be available to watch it anyway, but I don't think that conference committee is being streamed. So be on the lookout for updates. There. Yeah, Patrick will be there. We'll have representation there at the meeting. We also have the budget, Patrick. Yep.
Yeah, budget is pretty much, from a K-12 education perspective, at least as it relates to educator salaries, a done deal. The Senate passed their budget last week. They passed an identical salary schedule to the House, so that is now locked. Even when the budget goes to conference committee between the House and the Senate, they cannot change the salary schedule because it passed both chambers in identical format. And just as a refresher, that's the salary schedule that increases minimum starting pay from $42,500 to $47,000. It maintains all 5 lanes on the salary schedule, and it extends the number of steps for years of experience from 23 to 28. There's still some difference between the House and the Senate versions of the budget on how much state aid to classroom money is going to districts. PSTA believes the House position there is better because it would give districts additional money to address needs beyond salary increases, but the salary schedule increase is locked, and it is paid for in full by both the House and Senate version of the budget.
All right. Sounds good, Patrick. So you heard the top 3 items I guess we chatted about today. For more information, additional information, check out your land and your 1 minute advocacy in your email. Patrick, anything else before we close out today?
No, I just say that salary schedule information is a clear indication of why teachers should engage on S305,
Absolutely.
H4 2080
Yes.
if they care about that bill, because teachers spoke out in droves about the salary schedule back in February when the governor had put out his executive budget proposal, and members of the House heard from teachers. And the salary schedule ended up in a position that was fundamentally more closely aligned to what teachers wanted than what the governor had proposed in terms of collapsing lanes from 5 to 2. Again, I can't guarantee that if thousands of phone calls and emails go out in the next 6 days in support of S305/H4280, that it's going to get to the finish line. But I can guarantee it's got a better chance of getting there if educators engage.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better, Patrick. Well, thank you for your time. You're our favorite guest. Let's go with, yes, round of applause, Patrick. And Patrick has been working so hard this semester, this legislative session. So, Patrick, we hope this summer is full with tranquility, rest, and sleep. But we're not there yet. So
No sleep till Brooklyn or May 9th at 5 p.m.
All right, everyone. It's been another impactful episode of the PSTA podcast. I'm Craig King, your host. We'll see you next time.